Okay, so hi everyone, and welcome to this alumni panel. And today we're focusing on working in education and with young people. We have a truly fantastic panel. I've just been chatting to them all, and it's just so interesting the diversity of work that they do. So we've got people here who work in special educational needs, so who are working with children and young people who are in some way vulnerable or might have a learning difficulty. We've got people who are going into the classroom to teach, and we've got people doing other stuff besides. So we have someone here who's doing a doctorate in educational psychology, and I'll let the panel sort of introduce themselves. So without further ado, I'm just going to go around the panel as they appear on my screen and let them introduce themselves. So Polly, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your current role and maybe how you got into it?
Yeah, so hi guys, I'm Polly. I graduated with a master's in organisational psychology from the University of Manchester in 2014. My undergraduate degree was in psychology from the University of Bristol. And I was just saying earlier, although I haven't used my organisational psychology degree, I also worked as a student support worker at the University of Manchester and ManMet throughout my year at Manchester, which I thoroughly enjoyed. And then after that, I went to do my PGCE at UCL in social science, and I taught psychology and sociology for 2 years, and then I've taken a new direction, and I am an SEN teacher. And this is my 3rd year as an SEN teacher, and I work at a mixed independent school in West London.
Can you explain what an SEN teacher is, just for those students that maybe haven't heard that term before?
So an SEN teacher is a special educational needs teacher. So about a third of the children in my school have an educational psychologist report. So many of them are dyslexic, dyspraxic. We've got a few autistic children here. And my role is to run interventions throughout the school. So I run small group interventions, mainly for students who've either dropped GCSE options or who need a little bit of extra support. I also teach bottom set Key Stage 3 maths. And I also support in the classrooms. I'm a specialist assessor, so I can assess children for access arrangements. And it's a very, very varied role, which is why I love it. But it's very multifaceted. I run study skills clubs after school. So a bit of everything really, but yeah, supporting all those children in the school with the multitude of special educational needs.
Brilliant, thank you so much. And actually that brings us really nicely on to Jennifer, because you're on your way to becoming an educational psychologist.
Yeah.
So do you want to tell us a little bit about your role?
So I graduated from my undergraduate in psychology at the University of Manchester in 2014. And I immediately moved to Kent to do a PGCE in psychology. So I always knew I wanted to be an educational psychologist, but you have to have experience of working with children and young people, usually for 3 years, but some universities allow 2. So as I say, taught psychology for 3 years in a mainstream secondary school in Kent. And then applied to do the doctorate in educational psychology, which I started in 2018. I'm currently studying at the Institute of Education, which is part of UCL. And so I'm in my final year now. So come July, everything going well, I will have obtained my qualification. So currently a trainee educational psychologist. I essentially carry out the exact same role as an EP. I just don't have the accredited title, and my work has to be supervised by a qualified EP. I work for Kent County Council, and during my previous 2 years of my training, I worked for Camden Council and for Kensington and Chelsea as well. So you work at different local authorities as part of the job.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Jennifer. And Fazila, I guess your role almost spans the sort of gap between Jennifer and Polly. Maybe that's one way of characterizing it, in that Polly's in the classroom and Jennifer's kind of writing reports, and you're kind of supporting,
coordinating them. Yeah, no, that really makes sense. So hi, my name's Fazila. I graduated with a degree in psychology, a master's in educational psychology in 2016. from Manchester, and I did my undergraduate in psychology, general psychology, from Manchester as well. So I knew at the point when I was doing my masters, I knew that I wanted to go on to do the doctorate, like Jennifer, but I didn't have any experience in working directly with children with SEN. So I decided to become an SEN teaching assistant. So I worked for about 4 years in various different schools around Greater Manchester. So I started off from sort of level 2 teaching assistant and worked my way up to a high level teaching assistant. And so my last job was working in Birchfields Primary School, which is a sort of a local mainstream school here, very, very big. So I was there for about a year. After that, I thought, right, it's time to sort of maybe apply for the doctorate. But sort of my plans changed. I moved to Norway for a year, and then I didn't know what I was doing, moved back, and then decided to look for sort of assistant EP roles, education psychologist assistant roles, and I came across SEN casework and decided to apply for a statutory assessment officer role at Manchester City Council last year. So I got that, and I absolutely loved it because it gave me that chance to work very closely with EPs. There's an organisation called One Education that work for the City Council. So I worked very closely with them. And also this role allowed me to work with professionals such as, speech and language therapists, CAMHS practitioners, with schools, various different schools, with SENCOs, with the families themselves, and because I had that experience working directly with the children from the school, as a teaching assistant, I was able to sort of be in that position to really liaise with everybody and really see sort of the holistic picture of everything, and what kind of goes on behind the scenes of when parents send in their requests for EHCPs. So just to let you know what an EHCP is, it's an educational healthcare plan. So a child with SEN would normally have a statement or a plan in their school, and they get their sort of allocated funding via that plan. So it's to put that sort of support, provision in place in the school. So my job is basically to liaise with all the professionals involved with that child, from health, from social, and from education, and put it all into one document and allocate the funding with that. So yeah, I did that for a year at Manchester, and then moved to Bury, did the similar sort of thing along with SEN casework. And then recently I started at Sutton Council in London, and it's the same work. But the role is just sort of varies, and the title varies from, sometimes it's called a statutory assessment officer, SEN caseworker, EHCP coordinator. So yeah, but that's what the role is.
Brilliant, thank you. That's a great answer, and gives us a really good insight into the stuff that you're doing.
I do really want to go back and do what Jennifer's doing that at some point, but I think this work has really sort of given me that experience and what an EP work looks like. So I will hopefully try and go back to the doctorate at some point as well.
Yeah. And I guess the great thing is that when you've got all of that experience, and when you apply for your doctorate, you can say, well, I've been doing this, which is so, it's that thing, isn't it? It's like if you were going to become a clinical psychologist, you go and do lots of work with vulnerable patients, and in the same sense, I guess you're building up that portfolio of expertise now, which will open doors. Jennifer's nodding, so maybe she can comment, but will open doors for you later when you apply for the EP role.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah.
Okay. Fauzia, do you want to tell us a little bit about your pathway?
Okay, so I did my undergraduate at UCLan. After that, I went straight to my master's at the University of Manchester and did my master's in organisational psychology. That was all the way back in 2011, so it was quite a while ago. But then I sort of had this, gap where I had my children, raised my family. Wanted to get back into some sort of work, and my family background is sort of education. So I did my PGCE, which was fantastic, did it teaching psychology. I actually taught, during my PGCE placement, I taught undergraduates in their first year at the University Centre at Blackburn College. That was quite interesting. Since then, I've been working under a teaching agency. It's called Teaching Personnel. Now, there are a number of agencies out there. You're not just, doing to one. And the benefit of that is they sort of do the legwork. They go out and find the work. So short-term roles on a daily basis, I'll get a phone call 7:30 in the morning. this school needs a supply teacher or this school needs a cover supervisor. Would you be willing? The good thing about it is I can tell them what my work timings are. Say if my child's sick, I can say, no, sorry, I can't work today. I can block things off on the calendar. So it's kind of working when you are able to work. So great for family life, great if you've got other responsibilities, maybe you've got a care role, whatever else is going on in your life, it fits around that. I have had some longer term placements. For example, I taught psychology at Runshaw College for a term. That was a longer term placement covering maternity cover. And it is really, really varied. I'm going into mainstream secondary schools across Lancashire, and each day is completely different. So it is very, very varied. Yeah, teaching subjects, anything, covering maths, English, science. I've had to cover a German lesson. I don't know any German at all. I've had to cover PE, and I can't do PE. So it is really, really, really varied. Yeah.
It sounds. I can see all the benefits that you're pointing out in terms of the flexibility and the freedom to work when you want to. But it also sounds incredibly stressful to me. Just the idea that every day's like so different that you can't really plan ahead. Or
I think you need to have that resilience to be able to. You can't plan ahead. The most you can do, if you've got an appointment, just say, "Oh, I can't do that day, or I can't do that morning." Do you see what I mean? But for me, for our family, it works. It's kind of working when you're available.
Yeah, that's brilliant, and it's clear that you look delighted talking about it. So that is fantastic.
Yeah.
Jonathan, if we turn to you, last but not least, and you want to just tell us about what you do.
Yeah, is my sound working? Okay.
Yes, very clearly.
Yeah. So my name is Jonathan Lancaster. I'm a senior educational support assistant at Loretto Sixth Form College, which is just in Hume, down the road from the university. I did my undergraduate degree at the University of Manchester and graduated in 2012, and then carried straight on and did a master's in research methods the following year. So graduated again in 2013. I then went into, I guess, a couple of years, which sound quite similar to what Fawzia was just saying. Sorry if I said your name wrong there. Where I did a lot of supply work and a mixture of kind of one-day things and longer placements. And I did a couple of summers where I worked on the NCS as well. So did various things with young people. I think that gradually transitioned into doing a lot more with SEN and learning difficulties. I think really just because I had psychology on my CV is the main reason why they tapped into me for that. And I'm now in my 5th year in this job role, where I guess the easiest way of explaining it, I kind of manage the other support staff or teaching assistants in our department. Our department is, we're in a mainstream college of about 3,500 students, but we have a department of 30 students with moderate to severe learning difficulties, all with the HCP plans, and we do a specialist course for kind of essentially setting them up for an independent adult life in whatever way they can. So my sort of day-to-day work in that includes, as well as a bit of classroom support, it's managing the other support staff, timetabling them and the students, and then a lot of kind of computer and admin work around our work placement programs, supported internship programs, little bits of like departmental data and stuff. I think those are
brilliant. And I was just saying to the panel before, I don't know if people listening agree, but there's just something so magical about working in a school, I think. And I love my job as a university lecturer. I adore it, and I love teaching you guys. But there's just something when you walk through the gates of a school, I guess, where you just feel like you're really part of a community. And those, those school days are so important. And I think anything that can enhance that for the children that are there, whatever their background and whatever their needs, is just an amazing sort of vocation in life. Amanda, how are we doing in terms of questions then from our audience?
Yes, we've had one come in already. So a question about working with SEN children, and do you need any particular training or qualifications to work with them?
Jonathan?
I guess in terms of what I was saying before, I think just having psychology on my CV goes quite a long way with SEN. I had done, when I was at university, I did a kind of in my third year a little bit of volunteering at a primary school in Didsbury. And I would say that really having some experience working with young people and having a psychology degree, in my experience, is enough to get you something started working with SEN. I would definitely say for sort of where I work, we probably have, we have quite a lot of support staff who come in directly from university. It's quite common that we maybe have a few staff a year who are going on to a PGC or a teaching course next year, and they just kind of come in and say they're here for 1 year to get some experience with SEN, and we're fine with that. So yeah, I would say really that if you've got some experience with young people, however you can get that, and you've got a psychology in your degree, that's definitely enough for then getting something in kind of the department where I work that would then get you that further experience with SEN, which might take you on to something else that you're aiming for in the future.
That's really good to know, because it sounds like nearly everybody watching this could very easily reach sort of that benchmark to at least get started with or get their foot in the door to working in SEN. Polly, is that your experience as well, or do you agree with that kind of characterization?
Yeah, sorry, I just disconnected for a second. But yeah, definitely. I work in an independent school at the moment, but I do think that SEN departments look more for experience. I think Jonathan, I don't know whether Jonathan said that at the beginning, I didn't hear what he said, but and yeah, psychology degrees are great, and you know, experience. I did also a year as a learning mentor at an academy nearby here, and they looked on that really positively, that I had that experience before.
Brilliant. Fauzia?
Yeah, I agree with Jonathan and Polly. Just having a psychology degree always looked upon greatly if you want to get into SEN. Again, any voluntary work with SEN children, any work experience. What I do, general cover work, you end up getting involved with SEN students that are in mainstream education as well anyway. So just through normal general cover supply, you end up, you know, teaching them and getting involved with them anyway as well through that. So you don't necessarily have to go into an SEN school to get this, but that will be better, but you don't really have to, because I get my experience with SEN through my supply work. The other thing, sorry, I want to mention, if someone is, you know, struggling with their SEN knowledge, they want to bulk it up a bit, you do get like short online SEN courses that they can look at, which will help them with the theory of the different learning difficulties and disabilities if they want to just bulk up their knowledge.
Is there a particular place that students should look for that? Is there a particular course that you could recommend? Maybe not right now off the top of your head, but you could maybe send me a link. Or...
I'll do it that way. Yeah, I'll send you.
Yeah, fantastic. I guess even asking that then to Faseela, like, how do you think you got into that particular role? Because that's almost like a middleman role, I suppose.
Yeah, so I got my sort of initial experience, if you like, of SEN whilst I was at uni. So I don't know if they still have it actually. It was called a Manchester Leadership Programme. So it was, you could do like up to 60 hours of community work experience, voluntary work. So I took that up and I did something called the Literacy Booster Scheme. So it was initiated by the uni, and it was in partnership with some of the local schools at that time. This was like back in, I don't know, 2012. But so I did that, and that was sort of weekly planning sessions with a group of vulnerable children who weren't doing so well in literacy, and just sort of, you know, boosting their sort of literacy skills. And that just allowed me to go into the school on a weekly basis and develop my sort of teaching sessions with them, and that was an amazing experience. And then from that, I used that experience to get my first sort of job in SEN, I guess, as a tutor in an SEN tuition centre, and then also in the schools that I worked. And I actually worked through teaching personnel as well, Fauzia, in one of the schools, you know, through an agency. So I think once you have that initial, you know, foot in the door kind of thing, even whilst you're at uni, do that voluntary work, and that really, along with your psychology degree, it looks great. You know, to get into as a teaching assistant, it looks really, really good.
Brilliant, thank you. Amanda, how are we doing for the questions?
They're coming in now, that's great. A couple of people are interested to know what made our two panelists Polly and Fauzia, change from organisational psychology to working with children? What went on there?
Who wants to go first? I'll go first if you want. Well, like I said, I did my masters in 2011 and I had a lot of time off after that. And I guess to do your stage 2 organisational psychology, it's not something that I can afford right now, but it's something that I would love to go into when the time's right. Also, because my kids are only in primary school, I want to do something that fits around their timetable, fits around their school timings. I mean, most of the time, sometimes I'm back to pick them up from school. So I think because of that, doing teaching and doing supply work works for me now. But I think if I was on my own without a family, I would either try and go down the educational psychology route or the organisational psychology route, because they're both quite close to my heart. So it's just my life and circumstances, really. Nothing to do with the course. The course was fantastic, and it is a route that I enjoy. So it was just more to do with my lifestyle.
Okay, thank you. Polly.
Well, I went onto the organisational psychology course because I did think it would incorporate lots of kind of staff management and psychological applications in the workplace. And to be honest, when I got onto the course, I realised that it was a very kind of desk-based job, I guess, being an organisational psychologist. And for me, I'd always been involved in education in terms of like volunteering at special schools. And I think I thought, and I noticed one of the questions was, what advice would you give yourself, at university or something? And I think I thought I had to go and do something else before I did teaching. For some reason, I thought I needed more life experience. But actually, when I was doing my masters and being a student support worker at the same time, I realised I did actually enjoy that side of psychology a lot more, like developmental psychology and kind of mental and physical health conditions and supporting those with additional needs. And I just realised I wasn't corporate enough for that sort of role, to be honest. It's just not in my personality. And I think I am a professional, but I think I'm not the sort of person to be, in a suit going to an office every day and sitting at a desk. So that's what kind of changed my direction back to teaching, because it's something I've always really enjoyed.
We will go on to the next question then.
Sure. A question about what's a typical day like as an educational psychologist, please. I know you're still training, but how's it looking so far?
Yeah, so like I said, it is interesting you're doing the doctorate. The workload increases every year, so it's a 3-year doctorate. And so I'm in my final year now. You essentially are doing maybe 80% of what you would be doing as a qualified EP. As I say, you just have to have supervision, so all of your reports are checked, and you have observations from your university as well. So a typical day, I don't think there is such a thing, because every day is so different. I'd say one of the biggest kind of positive sides of the EP role is you essentially control your own diary. So I choose when I want to work, I set all my appointments. There are occasionally, if there's a big meeting in a school that has got other professionals, you may have to obviously attend that one. But generally, any work I do, I phone the schools and negotiate when I would like to do that. So examples of things I might do in a day. So in the morning, I might go into a school and I might be doing an EHCP assessment. So you receive paperwork about a child from the staff, from parents or carers, any other professionals who are involved. We read through that, and that's the point at which you build your psychological hypotheses around what might be affecting this child's learning, what might be a barrier to their education. And based on that, I would then decide how I'm going to approach my assessment. So am I going to look at their cognitive skills? Am I going to look at their emotional or mental health? Am I going to look at their sensory needs, at their physical health? And then go into the school, and typically would spend an hour and a half, 2 hours individually with the child or young person, and would do an hour consultation, sometimes 2 hours, with parents or carers and the school staff. So you see it as a bit of a jigsaw. You take all of the information you've gathered along with the documentation that you've previously received, and you use that to create a report of your hypotheses. So you're very much using psychology throughout. You're referring to self-esteem, you could be referring to humanistic psychology, you could be referring to stages of play. It's very broad, and I love that. You get to apply a myriad of psychological theory and perspectives. And then in the afternoon, I might then be delivering training. So I often deliver whole school training on things like dyslexia, anxiety. What else have I done this year? Suicide prevention is another one that we've done. But then at the same time, we do direct work with teachers as well. So some schools buy my time to come and speak to their teachers about their well-being. So I do one-to-one support where they can talk to me about their difficulties in the classroom, and we problem solve together. And then we do multi-agency work as well, where we meet up with SEN case officers. So like Fazila's work, we work a lot with them. We work with individuals in school. We work with speech and language therapists, CAMHS workers. So yeah, it's hugely varied, very exciting, and yeah, I would highly recommend it to anyone who's thinking of it.
Sounds amazing. I think I'm about to leave my job. Sorry, see, good luck with your psychology degree, everyone. I'm off. I suppose I had a question in my head that popped in. So yeah, are you sort of diagnosing students as such then, or not students but children, or is that something that's slightly different?
Yeah, so we don't typically diagnose. So often CAMHS would have a bigger role in that kind of stuff. We definitely would go in. So if there are, we could say, showing symptoms of or showing signs of or autistic tendencies, but we don't provide a diagnosis. Some local authorities, so when I was working in Camden, an EP would sit on the assessment panel for autism alongside a speech and language therapist and a paediatrician. So they did a multi-agency assessment to diagnose autism. Where I work in Kent, EPs aren't included in diagnoses of autism or dyslexia. I think privately they might, but if you work for the local authority or not. But as I say, that might vary slightly depending on which council you work for.
Brilliant. Amanda?
Can I ask a question of you as well, Jennifer? Is getting on to that doctorate, any tips for students about what you need to show or have to get through that selection process?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to mention, I attended the educational panel when I was in my year 3 of my undergrad, and an EP came and spoke. So that's partly why I kind of knew about the process as well. So I won't lie, it's very competitive, very similar to clinical psychology. They're very, there's a high uptake. Lots of people want to do it. The best advice I could give is they always want to hear about how you're applying psychology in whatever role you are doing. You could be working in a supermarket, you could be, how are you applying psychology in your role? So you really have to be able to explicitly talk about how you have applied theory and perspective. So have you supported children in developing their play, extending their play? Have you applied non-conditional, are you supporting self-esteem? Are you supporting them managing anxiety? And be able to confidently and explicitly talk about it. And honestly, it can be in any way. It doesn't have to be you don't have to be an assistant EP to do that. You could do it in any role. And another thing that I found very helpful is to be aware of legislation and your legal requirements as a psychologist. So they do want to know, are you aware of things like the Equality Act? Are you aware of the Special Educational Needs and Disability Code of Practice, the Children and Family Act? And how that impacts on your legal responsibilities as a psychologist, as well, obviously the BPS and the HCPC. So I would really do research around that, and just so that if you are in an interview or during an application, I would absolutely you must reference those things because they want to know that you have that holistic and contextual understanding of where our role sits within the education system.
Fantastic. Good tips there for Fazila too, for your upcoming application, hopefully, and of course for anyone else watching. Jennifer, did you have to apply multiple times, or were you lucky enough to secure a place straight away?
I was very lucky. I did get on my first attempt, but I'll be very honest, I prepared for months. And that was alongside I was head of psychology in a secondary school at the time. It was quite stressful, but I spent the whole of my summer holidays pruning my application. I did practice interviews with colleagues in education. And there is actually a Facebook group which anyone can join. I believe it's called Doctorate in Educational Psychology, but I can check. And lots of people who have finished the course, are currently on the course, or have experience of applying are on there, and they share advice and tips and things like that. And I also have some textbooks that I could share with you if students would find that helpful to have a look at as well.
Brilliant, thank you so much.
That's no problem.
Another question we had in, if that's okay, it's about applying for a PGCE. What was the process of becoming a teacher? If anybody could answer that one.
Jennifer?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that one. So I did my PGCE immediately after my undergraduate. That process, I recall, I also did the Manchester Leadership Programme that Fazila mentioned, and also did the Literacy Booster Programme with the John Rylands Library, and that really helped my PGCE application. I also just kind of sent a blanket email to lots of secondary schools and primary schools in Manchester, and actually 2 of them invited me in to do some shadowing, and that was immensely helpful. So the process, they did ask me things about how would you manage planning 25 lessons a week, what would you prioritise, where would you fit that time in. So it's good to have a little think about organisational skills. They also asked us to prepare a short lesson of 5 to 10 minutes, I think. So have a good think about what that might look like. Maybe there's loads of stuff online. TESS is a good website. Have a look at what other teachers have done, speak to people you know in education. And it was very much, they also were really interested in the psychology experience and how we looked at developmental psychology and how would that influence our knowledge and our practice. But it was actually quite a nice process. Maybe I'm comparing it with the doctorate application. That's influenced maybe my perception of the PGC one. But it wasn't too stressful a process, and I think there's so much out there online. It was definitely manageable preparing for that interview and the presentation.
Fantastic. Amanda?
Yeah, sorry, I was just about to put something in the chat there. We've gone quiet for questions from our audience, but I've got a question I'd like to ask, if possible, to everybody really, about what are the kind of the highs and lows, the goods and the challenging of working with children and young people?
Never work with children and young people. That's the answer.
Can I answer that one?
Sure.
So I would say the highs are that every day is different with children, and I think in some ways the children I work with, especially SEN children, they just make me laugh every day. I don't think there's any other job where you would laugh as much as I do in the day, just about what they come out with. And yeah, I just laugh every day. It's different every day. But I'd say also what's difficult is they are they can run away with themselves, and you have to kind of like bring them back in, especially if you've got a class of SEN children with additional needs, very complex needs, some of them. So you do have to have attention to detail, be a bit of a perfectionist, I'd say, to be a teacher. I know lots of my teacher friends, we are all perfectionists, and just care about the kids' progress enough, and care about the job and the profession. And I think, we do work really hard as teachers, but we love it. So that's why we do it for the children. And because we love the job. So that's the highs and lows from my point of view.
And presumably you form close relationships with the families of those children, I imagine, especially the special educational needs ones, where maybe mum is coming in to maybe see the progress, ask questions. Is that kind of a fair characterization?
Definitely, I'd say, especially the SEN children, because a lot of I was an acting Senko last year, and you do form really good bonds with not just the family, but if you have TAC meetings, for example, if that child has an EHCP, you go to all the TAC meetings with the parents, the parents in our school are great. They're really on board with everything that we're doing. I don't know about other schools. I think, a different school that I worked at before, the parents are a little bit more laid back, but you form great relationships with the parents with SEN. I think they're just really appreciative of everything we do.
That's lovely. That's another really nice kind of one thing that I'm really getting from all of you is this sort of intrinsic motivation to kind of do this rather than something external and extrinsic. It really feels like it's coming from within you guys for the you all seem to have like almost like a strong sense of social responsibility, social justice, wanting to kind of really help young people to develop, and that is just lovely, and it really shines through, I think. And I think it resonates I think it will be resonating very well with our students watching this, because that's exactly what they want to, I think, and I can see it in them. Amanda, do we have any more questions from our students?
We've not got any more coming through from the chat at the moment.
No.
Is from other students is kind of a big desire to use your psychology. So if you do undergrad psychology, and then it's kind of everybody wants to use it in some way, and so it's a question really: does everybody feel that they're still using their psychology? Is this been something that's enabled them to kind of continue with that?
Jonathan, yeah.
I mean, I think my answer maybe is possibly a bit different to what other people might say. I didn't really focus on like developmental psychology or anything when I was at university, and it's not really the kind of main interest I have now working in. I think most of the psychology skills I use, I think I mentioned before, my master's was in like research methods, and I think actually it's a lot of the kind of the organization and the making processes which are kind of perfect essentially, and things like that, and thinking about things like I think a lot about like validity. I think when I'm working with students, like, is the way I'm asking them a question, is that actually getting them to answer what I think they're answering and stuff like that. So it's not so much the kind of brain and development side of psychology that I think I use a lot, but I think the kind of the research processes and stuff you pick up there I use a lot. I do a lot of work. I work with like data in the department at the end of the year in terms of our student destinations, student demographics, qualifications and things like that. And again, I often think of the modules I did, which were about presenting data. And I think that's possibly something, whether you go into education or not, that you can find something there, because it probably applies to just about any job you do if you approach it with that kind of scientific rigor, I guess it is. It's quite a niche and useful skill that's well valued. So that's what I'd say from it.
That sounds great. And again, I can really imagine you needing to like monitor progress and monitor kind of benchmarks and all of that is, as you say, a kind of database skill. What about the rest of you? Do you think, do some of you feel like you're using more developmental psychology in there, or do you agree that it's more about those research skills? Or if I open it up to the panel, Jennifer. Yeah.
I'd say it's fairly even for me at the moment with the doctorate, because obviously you have a thesis to write, so we're certainly applying a lot of the research skills. But even within the role of an EP, there is a responsibility of the EP to be aware of evidence-based practice. And if you are recommending something in a statutory, which is a legal document, you have to be able to defend that. So if you're saying this child needs 8 hours of this metacognitive intervention, you have to be able to stand up and say, I know that that's been tried and tested. This is the evidence base. These are the strengths. These are the limitations. So that with that comes things like data collection, data analysis, and being able to formulate an accessible report that a layperson could read who perhaps isn't as au fait with research methods. So whilst in the doctorate that's very prevalent, even in the work of an EP, you are expected to engage with research and keep up to date with the development of interventions and whatnot. But then also we do obviously look at developmental psychology a lot, because we work with the age range of 0 to 25. So an EP could be in a nursery in the morning and then doing an assessment for a 23-year-old in a university who might have dyslexia in the afternoon. So you are expected to have an understanding of human development throughout that stage. So you might be looking at developmental milestones in a 3-year-old. Are they suffering from global developmental delay? Are they perhaps suffer experiencing difficulties in one specific area of need. So yeah, I'd say it's fairly balanced from our perspective, but absolutely echoing Jonathan's point that research methods and those skills, they're really prevalent in the work of a psychologist as you go through your career as well.
Terrific. I haven't really got any more questions for myself. Amanda, you might have something you want to ask.
I'd like to ask, what next for all of you? Where do you see this going? Is there another kind of desire or challenge ahead? So what happens next?
Fawzia?
Okay, I'm hoping to get some concrete SEN experience, to be honest. I've spoken to my agency and I've said if there's anything that comes up SEN wise, that is something that I'm looking to get into. And it seems like I'm going down the route that, you know, Jennifer and everyone else sort of go the EP sort of route, but I need to get that concrete SEN experience in first. So yeah, that's me.
Good, brilliant. It sounds like you've got a plan there to get it as well. You talk to your agency, so hopefully they'll be able to help you. And
I do want to mention the question earlier about working with young people. Yeah, you've got your positive experiences, as Polly mentioned, very rewarding experiences, meeting a lot of students across different schools, but you need to have a great deal of resilience as well. You know, students can be disruptive. You've got to have good behavioural management. You know, most schools have this on-call system where if students are being, you know, quite aggressive or maybe violent, that's there for you to use. And you just need to be aware of that, I guess, before you actually go in to start wanting to work in secondary schools, especially. So,
yeah, I mean, I guess anyone who's ever taught has had that moment, that disastrous moment where you stood up and you think, I'm about to lose control of this session or this class, or that kid is literally out of control and I don't know what to do. I'm not sure I can do it. And I think it's just really good that you've mentioned that, Fawzia, because that shouldn't be a barrier to putting you off teaching. I mean, I definitely remember even when I started lecturing that, you know, when I first started, I don't think I quite knew what I was doing. And, you know, you try different things and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't work. And you just have to acknowledge that. And I guess, you know, in a school environment, it's just intensified so much more than a lecture where, of course, you don't have to worry about things like behaviour management. Although this lot are terrible, awful, terrible cohort. No, I'm joking, they're fantastic. They're brilliant students and they just behave so well. But I really can imagine that that sort of tension. And I know that you would have all had experiences like that. So I want to hear more about that, actually. I think it's really interesting. So Jonathan, what were your kind of what's next for you in terms of what you want to do beyond this? Do you have a next goal, or are you just?
I mean, I've got to say my short answer is really that I don't know. I think I'd say it kind of ties into what I was saying before of like what I actually like about the job is the kind of I guess the sort of data and the things that are a bit like research methods kind of side of it. And I've kind of developed a bit of a niche role, I think, in my department, which allows me to do a lot of that. I think the easy next step, probably at any point for me in the last 6 years, would have been to look for a teaching degree, which I don't think is what I want to do. So it's kind of just seeing what comes up. I guess I've thought a little bit about maybe working for like exam boards or something like that, because I think that, from what I've seen of it, is something that kind of has a similar sort of, or requires a similar skill set to the skills that I like using. But I mean, it's entirely possible to answer my next job might not be in education if I just find something where I think that it gives me like the admin and the data and the report writing side of things that I like. So yeah, essentially, I don't know.
No, but
if you want to go into teaching, then kind of following my path definitely puts you in a strong position from here.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's you know, everything you said really sounds, you know, totally plausible. I mean, there's just so many things that you could do with your skill set and all the things that you've developed. Polly, what's next for you, do you think?
Well, actually, before I started this role, I did apply for educational psychology at UCL. And I got an interview, and then they said in interview, you need more SEN experience. So this is why I'm in this role, but I love it. And last year I thought about, you know, do I want to apply? do I want to do it this year? And then I thought, I'm enjoying it so much. And at that point I was acting Senko, and I'm back into my old role now. So yeah, I don't know how many years I'm going to do it for, but definitely one day I will be applying for the educational psychology doctorate again.
I think if you're happy though, I mean, there's no rush. I think that's a really powerful message that all our students should listen to. And I think some of the messages that have come out today have just been like terrific. So, you know, you might apply for one thing, as both Fawzia and Polly did in terms of organisational psychology, and then end up doing something completely different. And that is the normal kind of healthy path of life. You know, we can't plan exactly what we want to do, and we wouldn't be honest with ourselves if you didn't start doing something and then see something else and think, actually, that looks terrific as well. Maybe I'll go and do that for a bit. You know, and I think other messages have been really powerful too about, you know, I'm actually really happy in this job right now. You know, yes, I've got a very long-term kind of desire to be an EP, but maybe not right now, not this year, maybe not next year. And so I think, you know, it's really good to just acknowledge these kinds of ideas that, you know, we don't want to be on a conveyor belt just chasing things for the sake of it. Yeah. Jennifer, I suppose your next step's pretty straightforward though, because you know, you're going to submit your doctorate, and I guess that's the next big thing to achieve.
Yeah, I've actually got my interview for Kent County Council in 2 weeks. So in your third year of your doctorate, typically that's when you start applying for jobs, and I've really enjoyed working here. I live here, so that's where I've applied. So yeah, hopefully from September next year I will be practicing under the actual title of EP, and I think I'll stay there for a while. It's been quite a ride the past 3 years. So yeah.
I think after the doctorate you totally deserve feet up for a little bit and just enjoy what you've achieved. Fazila, it looks like your next step's probably to follow Jennifer.
I would just like to sort of echo what Polly was saying actually, because my sort of end goal is to hopefully one day become an EP as well. But I do want to say that I think everybody has their own journey and they come across various different things, and there isn't sort of a set route going into the doctorate. So along the way, you're most likely to come across roles and jobs which you end up, you know, loving and then staying in that. So even like with my current role, I love it. I absolutely really enjoy it, and it gives me that chance to sort of work with different councils, different local authorities, and then because of that, different education psychology services. So on a daily basis, I'm reading reports from education psychologists, and you know, that's where sort of my knowledge of child development from my psychology degree sort of comes into use. You know, the code of practice, everything has to be based on that. So I'm constantly sort of, you know, I'm sort of feeling that, yes, my degree isn't going to waste, and I'm using that. So, and the fact that, you know, you are through this document, it's a legal document. So through this, you are actually helping a family, you are helping a child. So you're still doing something, you know, which is motivation, you know, is to kind of carry on on this journey. But yeah, I'd really like to stay doing this and possibly work with a few more local authorities, and then that way I can work with different educational psychologists and read different kinds of reports and different ways of doing things, assessments and stuff, and then, you know, eventually get to the point where I feel comfortable applying for the doctorate. But yeah, I've not sort of thought about when I will do that. But yeah, that's the plan.
Totally not relevant. What was life like in Norway? You said you went to Norway for a year, I think, last year.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I got married and my husband's from Norway, so I moved there, but I'm actually Norwegian myself. I was brought up there, so I moved when I was about 7 or 8 actually to England, but you know, nationality wise I'm Norwegian, so the plan was just to sort of move there and go back to uni actually, but it never really worked out. After a year I moved back, and then that's when I kind of came back and thought, okay, I need to do something with my degree. But yeah.
Hvordan har du det?
Oh, you know what, I didn't start school until you start school really late there. Okay. So I was 7 and I was supposed to start school, so I never learned the language. So I know like what 2 or 3 words, that's it.
Yeah,
so you're probably better than me. Okay. Do you know the language?
I'm just obsessed with languages, and so I know a little bit of Norwegian. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. Okay, so I think there's usually one last question which I'm going to ask you all to very briefly comment on, and that's that if you could give advice then, one piece of advice to our current students, or if you could go back in time and give a piece of advice to yourself even, what would that be? Fazia, yeah.
My advice would be just don't waste your time once you do your degree. Get out there, do some voluntary work. You might not know where you want to go with your life. You don't know what career you want to get into. It doesn't matter. With psychology, I think Jennifer touched on this, working in a supermarket. Just go out there and do any voluntary work, any work experience, and that will automatically open doors to where you want to go. And it could literally be anywhere. So
yeah, that's brilliant. It's another one of our main messages, be active, basically.
Yeah.
Jennifer, what would you say to your former self? Or
I suppose leading on from that, when you are applying psychology, so if you're working with children in whatever role that is, keep like a little log of some kind. It could be in your notes on your phone, it could be on your laptop, but what theory were you applying, what came of it? Because when you come to writing an application, whether that's for a PGCE, whether it's for a doctorate, any role in psychology, in education and psychology, to be able to confidently talk about that, and this might be something that happened 2 years ago, that's why I say keep the notes, because it's not always easy to remember. You can pull that out, and honestly, that's exactly what they're wanting. They're wanting to hear how have you applied what you've taken from your undergraduate degree to your working practice. And just to tag on, I would also say, if you were thinking of applying for the doctorate, definitely look into the kind of psychology that university prescribes to. So all universities will obviously look at all different types of psychology, but different ones, so like the Tavistock is a bit more psychodynamic. So I would say have a little look and see if there's a university that leans more towards your preferences in psychology, because that will also really help you with applications as well.
On that point, Jennifer, do you think there's some theories that are more sort of well regarded? So when I hear psychodynamic now, I sometimes think that it's, I don't know, and this might be unfair, but slightly less evidence based than something else. Do you think there's a mainstream that students should be considering, or do you think it doesn't really matter in the end?
So from my experience, any psychological theories, as long as you can talk about them confidently and you know the evidence behind them, are okay. But I would agree, so psychodynamic, there are certain methods like where we're looking at children's drawing and interpreting drawings. Some people are a bit skeptical about, well, what's the evidence base? How do you know that's what the child's unconscious is thinking? But one of the biggest, which we reference all the time, is attachment theory. So really to be able to look at different attachment types, internal working models of children, how that impacts on subsequent relationships, how you build additional attachments within schools if a child has had a traumatic childhood. Read about attachment theory, and you can't go wrong.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Fazila, what would you say to a former self?
Just that I wish I knew that there were all these other various roles that you could sort of get into. I mean, even if your sort of end goal was to eventually do the doctorate in EP, but I think most people over here would probably want to do that at some point. But I wish I was told or mentioned that there are other roles once you get your sort of your SEN experience, working in schools directly with children with, for example, ASD or global delayed development, learning difficulties, you can then do other roles. So I think, something like an EHCP coordinator, I would not have known back in uni at all. I would not have known what it is. So just a bit more knowledge, I think, about roles like this. And also the role that Jonathan's doing, it sounds really interesting, and I just wouldn't have known how to get into it, I guess, at that point, yeah.
Jonathan, then moving on to, Amanda.
Can I just add one quick thing? We did a recording of a panel about ways to work in mental health, and I'm just putting the link in the group, and there was a lady in there who was working as an educational mental health practitioner, I think. So that's the link, but she was working in an education setting around supporting children with mental health. So it's another role that we've not heard about before. So the link's in there, and that's available to watch through that link as well. Thanks, Dora.
Brilliant. We're almost out of time, but I would like to hear from Jonathan and then from Polly, just about if there's any particular piece of advice that they would share.
Yeah, so I've got to get to another meeting at 2, so I was just writing it in the chat. I would very quickly say, I mean, mainly I'd echo the advice that other people have given. But I think I said earlier, like, I do think if you can get some experience working with young people and you've got psychology on your CV, that's very much enough to get into kind of some of the stuff that I do in colleges working with SEN. And then I'd say that's a very good platform to then go on to whatever else you want to do. So that would be something I'd recommend.
Brilliant. We'll let you go, Jonathan, to your meeting.
Thank you.
Polly, thank you very much for taking part today. And Polly, if you've got a minute before your next meeting, anything you wanted to add?
I did say this earlier, but the advice that I would give to myself at uni and to you guys is if you feel like you want to do something, I wouldn't say you're ever too young to do it. So for me, for example, I thought, I have to do something before being a teacher. Why don't I try something office-based? And I really deep down, I think I knew that wouldn't suit me. And I was a little bit scared. I just felt like I didn't have enough life experience to be a teacher. But then, I went back into it, and I actually think being a little bit younger in some respects does actually advantage you as being a teacher, because I know with the kids that I work with, we have a great relationship, and I can, they can relate to me in some ways and I can relate to them in some ways. So I think if you want to do something, don't wait for it to come along. You have to be proactive about doing it yourself. And it's not, I don't think it's a mistake that I did the organisational psychology. I really enjoyed that year, and actually in a different way, it helped me to find my career. So
brilliant. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, panel. You've been absolutely fantastic. That was riveting and insightful. So thank you so much. There's loads of brilliant pieces of advice there that I know will be hugely beneficial to our students. And students, please do feel free to fill out some feedback. We'd love your feedback about the session by going to the link that Leah has posted. We're always trying to work hard to reflect your needs and to make changes where we can. And getting feedback is really important. So please do take a moment to fill that out. Apart from that, I will like to thank Amanda for doing such a great job at following the questions there, and thank the panel once again. And I think with that, we can stop the recording, Leah.